When a bagel knife mysteriously disappears in a local convenience store, the workers are baffled. Little do they know it's not a simply misplaced item. It's actually proof of the paranormal. And then we travel to Florida to take a look at the story of a small family being terrorized by a large problem. When a little boy is woken up in the middle of the night because there's a monster staring at him through a bedroom window, this family realizes that things are going to get a whole lot worse before they can finally get some rest. Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys had an awesome weekend. I am back. My health bar is fully replenished, 100% health. It's in the yellow, boys. If you're a fan of fighting games, that makes sense. And if not, you think I just somehow now have jaundice and my skin is yellow. But someone who never has jaundice, someone who's able to fight off every infection that comes his way. Everyone get on your feet and give it up for our newest Patreon supporter. Stay strapped. Woohoo, yeah! Come on in, stay strapped. Come on in to Dead Rabbit Command. Stay strapped, you're going to be our captain, our pilot this episode. If you guys can't support the Patreon, I totally understand, I really do. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. Now, the name Stay Strapped, I think, is referring to the slang term for always have a gun on you, which will come in handy this episode. If you happen to have a gun with you while listening to this podcast, get it ready. Take that safety off and set it next to you, because we might need it. We might be just shooting randomly as you listen to the podcast. That probably generates some buzz for the show. I'm sure the local news would want to cover that story. Stay Strapped is bringing out his weapons. I don't know. I assume that's what it means. He could be some leather worker or something like that. He could be like a guy who sharpens razors with leather straps. He's like, what's all this gun stuff talk? What does this have to do with anything? Stay strapped. I'm going to go ahead and toss you the keys to the Jason Jalopy we're going to leave behind Dead Rabbit Command and drive us all the way out to a convenience store. And we're also going back in time, so hit that button. We're going back to one of my top 5 favorite time periods, the 1990s. We don't have a specific location for the story, but it's the 1990s. We're at this convenience store, and we're going to meet This story starts off with a lot of odd questions. From what I understand, the story does take place in America. We're about to meet this young girl. We're going to call her Felicia. She didn't give her real name. She's 14. And she's working at a convenience store. I know with most places you have to be 16 to have a learner's permit. And the only reason why I bring this up, because I could have just left her age out of it. It doesn't really play a part. But let me say this. It's super interesting to say, if you were making up a story, I don't think you would make up a detail. I don't think you would make up an illegal detail like that. Because that is a question, right? What's a 14-year-old girl working at a convenience store? Is that even legal? Her mom worked there as well. I know sometimes there can be family arrangements. Or sometimes the owner may just not care. But I find that interesting. It's one of those things that when I read the story, I go, you know what? This story probably is true because it's an odd detail to start with. Felicia, she's working at this convenience store. She works a lot of the late night overnight shifts. And a lot of times she's working alone. Like her mom works at the convenience store, but they work different shifts. Felicia, when she's working alone, she'd start to notice things at this convenience store. Sometimes it would feel like someone was poking her from behind. What, huh? She's like trying to sort out the Funyuns from the Doritos. What, huh? Poke. Oh, man, huh? Mild inconvenience. Definitely paranormal, because you'd spin around, there'd be nobody there. It's not like, I should have said that. It's not like there was a man standing behind her poking her going, Miss, do you know where the whatchamacallits are? Sometimes, though, that's just annoying. If you have a ghost, that's annoying. Sometimes, though, when she's at the convenience store by herself late at night, she would feel somebody kicking her Totally different. Totally different sensation and more violent. If someone came up and said, sir, sir, and poked you on the shoulder, you'd be like, huh? If you're standing there and someone kicked you on the shoulder and then go, where are the soup? Where's the soup aisle? You're like, first off, a convenience store doesn't have a soup aisle. Secondly, all of a sudden you see two health bars appear over yours and his head. It's a fight. Felicia would notice sometimes that there would be cold spots in the store, but not by, where all the cold stuff is. She's like, wow, this sure is paranormal. She's standing next to the Ben & Jerry's ice cream freezer. She's like, I call the Ghostbusters. The cold spot would move through the convenience store. But what's interesting is she did have a connection. She did make a paranormal connection to the cooler area. Like, that's where you put all the cool stuff. Like sunglasses and leather jackets. Back in where they keep all the ice cream is really, I probably should take the story a little more seriously, but I like this story. I'm not bad-mouthing it. Back in the area where they did have all of the coolers, sometimes she would catch a glimpse of a reflection. Not standing in front of her, but standing like the reflection. So, of course, she would turn around. There'd be nobody there. And also, when she was around that area by the coolers, she felt like she was constantly being watched. But the big issue she had, and this went on for a while. This wasn't just like one crazy night. The big issue was a bagel knife. There was a bagel knife that the store had because apparently people would buy bagels there, and you're not going to bring your own knife. If you would have just brought your own bagel and made it at home. People would buy bagels here. It probably had like a bagel toaster and all that. There was this knife that they used for bagels called the bagel knife, and it kept disappearing. They couldn't find it. Felicia would be standing at the counter, and some guy's like, hey, I really want to eat this honey raisin bagel or whatever, but I can't find your knife. He's like, so I refuse to eat it. He throws it on the ground, stuffs on it. You have it, ants and birds. I'm out of here. Felicia's like, oh, not the bagel knife again. And she'd look around and she'd be like, well, where in the world does this bagel knife keep going to? It keeps disappearing. But then it would reappear somewhere else. And she goes, this just happened all the time. And it wasn't another employee taking it because I'd be here alone. And I didn't touch it. You could argue, well, Jason, it's a convenience store. I'm sure customers, it's not their stuff. They'll pick up the bagel knife and use it to cut a bagel. And they may set it down on top of a microwave or, drop it on the floor, throw it in the garbage can because they're not really thinking. Yeah, that's true, but how do you account for the roaming invisible cold spots? So she did kind of chalk this up to all. See, the thing is like all of these things, it's not like they happened in one night. And I think that if you were in a workplace and you felt a cold spot kind of move past you, you may go, because, we're fans of the paranormal. Even if you don't believe in everything, we still like these stories. You may go, oh, that's weird. That was kind of creepy. But you may not connect that to 3 days later feeling like someone touched you on the shoulder. And then you turn around and there's nobody there. You're not going to go, another piece of the paranormal puzzle. The game is afoot. Because we undergo weird sensations all the time. And over a period of time, it's only when you can start to see patterns. And when you go, okay, listen, the bagel knife has appeared and reappeared. It's not like she saw it dematerialize. They just couldn't find it. And then find it later. Like, that was it. And you would just assume that you misplaced it. But over a period of time, you're kind of putting stuff together and you go, I think something might be going on here. I don't know how any of it's connected. The reflection and the bagel knife and the cold spots, that's probably the most paranormal thing. The kicking and the poking is actually pretty rare in the world of ghosts. Poking's a little more common. Kicking's rare. That type of violence is rare. And it's not like her knees are getting busted, backwards or anything like that. It's not like Jean-Claude Van Damme was assaulting her. It's just like a kick. Not like a violent. So she's like, I can't go to work today because I got so injured at work. I need to go home early. Not like that. Well, after enough time has passed, again, you're not going to say this right off because you would just sound like a lunatic, but One day Felicia's talking to her mom and she goes, hey, it's really weird. It took me a while to kind of figure out what could be going on. I actually still don't know, but there's a lot of weird stuff going on in that convenience store. Seeing a reflection in the cooler glass, and Bagel Knife keeps disappearing. Every so often I feel someone kick me from behind, and her mom's just kind of sitting listening to her, and the mom goes, yeah. Yeah, I've had those experiences as well. And I just thought it was me. Because it's not super... You're not going to go and tell all your coworkers, hey guys, guess what? Sometimes it's cool. Sometimes there's a cool spot in the convenience store. You know what I mean? But once someone says it, then you start to put this pattern together too. And you're like, I've experienced all that as well. And they start talking to other employees and they said, oh, yeah, I felt that as well. So now it's not a bored teenage girl working illegally at a convenience store who's experiencing this. Multiple witnesses all identifying the same phenomenon. Well, eventually Felicia gets some information and she kind of patches together this story. What she finds out is that shortly before Felicia started working at the convenience store, the owner's son of the store, we'll call him Bill, was working that night. Ding-ling-ling, ding-ling-ling. The doorbell rings as this man runs into this convenience store and he's totally freaking out. And Bill is just, this is a quiet little convenience store and some dude runs in and you're expecting the worst, like robbery or something like that. Probably would have been better than what actually happened. This man runs in and goes, oh my God, there's been a car accident. There's been a horrible car accident. Oh my God, my girlfriend's trapped. I can't get her seatbelt off. I need a knife. Do you have a knife? I need to cut the seatbelt off. Bill immediately turns around to grab the nearest knife because he's not really questioning this guy. You just would go, oh, there's been a car accident. You're not going to be like, well, where was it at? You're not going to be like, you're going to want to help. Questions for later or never. It's really none of your business. But anyways, Bill turns around and grabs the bagel knife to give to this man. And when he turns back, this man is laying on the floor of the convenience store. He collapsed and died. Bill calls the authorities, right? The police, rescue crews come out. And they do see the car accident. I don't know how close it was, like if it was directly outside the convenience store, or I don't know how close it was, but the fire and rescue crews are able to get to the car and save his girlfriend's life. She is trapped in the wreckage. They can't get the seatbelt off. They're able to save her life. But when they come to the convenience store to take a look at this man who had collapsed on the floor, what they realized, I don't think they realized this at the scene, they probably did an autopsy, but what they realized was that the car accident was so violent that he sustained massive damage to his esophagus. And he just had minutes at max to live. Apparently this is a thing. This is, again, one of those details that I looked up. I go, are they just making this up? You can have damage done to your esophagus, and you'll know it. It's not like he was like, and after this, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir auditions. No, like he felt the pain from it, but the adrenaline would have drowned out, or at least dulled, a lot of that pain. There was no saving him. He was dead no matter what. You couldn't. I mean, I guess maybe if you got there like right away, you could probably. Right now, you have an esophageal tear. You're listening to this podcast in your house as you hear an ambulance down the road. You're like, oh, great, the most depressing episode ever, specifically for me. Maybe there's hope, but the point is that he died. And you can have this type of damage and continue to walk around. I mean, again, you're not going to be like, oh, 5 mile jog today after that horrible car accident. You can walk around. But it's an interesting detail that's not made up. That is an actual injury that can happen. So I really do believe that this story is possible. And Felicia hears this story, and now everything kind of makes sense. She goes, you have this person in this convenience store who's trapped. That's the reflection I'm seeing in the glass. The cold spots, it's very typical ghost behavior. The kicking and the poking, I mean, really, that's a way to get someone's attention. The kicking, again, is a little more insulting. But imagine if you were trapped here. And we did a story not too long ago about a ghost perception of time. I'll put that episode in the show notes. We don't even know how that works. To them, they could be living minute to minute. Well, they could be existing, probably a better term, minute to minute like a human and experiencing each moment like we do. Or time could just be so random and chaotic that they're standing there and then the next thing, it's 4 days later. There's a totally different employee in front of them. And then it's 8 days later. And it's just like time's jumping. We don't know how time works. We don't even know how time works in the afterlife, let alone how a ghost or spirit could perceive it while still on Earth. But it would be, what I'm saying is it could be very confusing. It would definitely be angry, alienating. You're going to have bad manners, is kind of what I'm getting at. So poking, just trying to get someone's attention, right? There's probably a lot of screaming ghosts do that we don't really hear. Imagine being in a room full of people and nobody knows that you're there, but you can perceive them, and we don't understand why they can't see us. So I'm sure ghosts scream a lot at the top of their lungs trying to get someone's attention, and we just can't hear it. That's a grim thought. Well, anyways, Felicia goes, I think I have enough information. I think I know who this person was. Apparently, I think the girlfriend who was in this car accident was a teacher at like a local high school. She was kind of able to piece this local story together. And so she began, when she was working overnight in the convenience shop, she would begin talking out loud as she's walking around the convenience shop, saying, when she was alone, she wouldn't do this when customers are in there. They're like, 1-star review on Yelp, please. They're inventing Yelp so they can leave a 1-star review. She would walk around and she'd be like, hey, your girlfriend, she's alive. She made it out of the car accident. I know that you spent your last moments trying to save her, but don't worry, she is still alive. You can move on. You don't have to be trapped here anymore. And Felicia's mom began doing that too. When she was working by herself, she'd kind of walk around and be like, it's okay, everything's fine. She survived the car accident. She got out of the seatbelt. You don't need to be here. You did what you needed to do. Technically really saved her life, right? Had he not come in, they wanted to call 911 anyways. Depending on how close the car accident was to the convenience store. But I mean, a matter of moments in these type of things. And Felicia said we continued to do that for a while. When we were working, we would just talk to him and say it's okay, he can leave. Eventually, the activity at the convenience store stopped. No more cold spots, no more pokes. And the bagel knife could always be found where the last person left it. It's a fascinating ghost story, and really it's a traditional ghost story. The idea of somebody sticking behind because of an unfinished goal. And what's interesting too is if you really break it down, sometimes I find these cool stories and I tell them, and as I'm talking about them, these things pop in my head that we can extrapolate out for like 20 minutes, and that's not what I'm able to do, unfortunately. I try to keep the podcast at a certain time limit, but very classic ghost story. A person is stuck behind because of an unfinished goal. But, again, we don't know how close the car accident was to the convenience store. Let's say, the reason why I keep bringing that up is I figure it was not close enough that that Bill working the convenience store heard it. Because if he heard the car accident, then, he would have been calling the authorities and all that stuff. So let's say maybe 3 blocks away, right? Let's say maybe 400 or 500 yards. So close enough that a guy with a damaged esophagus can get to the convenience store, but far enough that it's not necessarily, it's not like a raging fireball outside the convenience store. But let's settle with about 500 yards away, not super far. What I find weird about this story, other than, just the basic ghost lore that we have here, is what we have is the limited knowledge of the dead. And this is super important when we look at things, how people are consulting the dead, like Ouija boards or psychics, communicating, mediums, all that stuff. Because this ghost, we didn't give him a name. We'll go ahead and call him Tony. This ghost, Tony, this young man who died in this convenience store, he didn't know what was going on outside that store. He died there, and 500 yards away, his girlfriend is rescued, cut free, taken to the hospital, and then in that same town lived her life. Probably attended his funeral, was probably near his body at some point. Funeral home, funeral ceremony, or whatever. I think they just call it funeral. Around his family members in the area, his friends in the area, his psychic connections to the area, the girlfriend would have still been part of that. Tony had no idea she was still alive all this time later. We don't know exactly, so she says this happened shortly before she started working. This is a story that, just as a standard ghost story, we do have enough information to enjoy it, as much as we can enjoy the story of a man whose esophagus is crushed. But just as a classic ghost story, it works. I think sometimes Dead Rabbit Radio, we really like to dig into it, so I like some more details. How long did she work there? How long did the phenomenon happen? How long did this happen before she started working there? It would give us a timeline, but let's just, for estimate's sake, 1.5 years from the time that he died to the time that he left, and I'm just kind of pulling that number out. She couldn't have been working illegally for that long, okay? She had to, I'm assuming, that she's still not working there. I'm assuming this didn't go on. 1.5 years that he was dead and had no knowledge of the world outside the convenience store. Nothing. He might have been able to look at a newspaper. Newspapers all floating around. He's like, oh, the funny pages. This will cheer me up. This will take my mind off of my crushed esophagus. Charlie Brown. He probably could scan the newspapers. He could probably overhear what people were saying, but people in the convenience store are mostly talking about the weather. He can see that by looking out a window. He wants to know if his girlfriend's still alive. In fact, he was so sure that she wasn't that he was still taking that bagel knife to save her. And you could call this, there's different type of hauntings. One of them is a recorded haunting or a residual haunting. That's a traumatic event that is recorded into the landscape that plays out over and over again. You could classify this kind of as that, because the bagel knife keeps disappearing. A tragic event happened but remember, he didn't have the bagel knife. He wasn't given the bagel knife. He died before he got the bagel knife. And the fact that eventually the phenomenon ended after the intervention of Felicia, I keep forgetting what name I gave her, and the mom, I assume that this was his actual soul trapped here. And what I'm trying to get at is, imagine, this is worse than what we could have thought of when we thought about ghosts. Like that episode I did as to how chaotic is time to a ghost. That was bad enough. Imagine that if you die, you will die, but if you die and become a ghost, and because it doesn't happen to everyone, you're a ghost, you are limited to the knowledge in that room or house or forest or church or wherever you're haunting. You have no knowledge of anything else going on in the outside world. That is 100 times worse. It could just be because I'm an information junkie and I start in my day by reading news, not books, not novels, not literature, but just articles. Not even knowing that you didn't have to stay behind, that the problem had been solved. You have limited knowledge. Growth is part of the human condition. Learning is what makes us us. Who you are today is because of the lessons you learned previously. The idea of not learning after death, The idea of not experiencing, like, as a ghost, you would hope that it was reversed, that you could be like, yes, now I'll read every book ever written. You know, you're just going to hang out, watch some kid's YouTube, you're floating around your shoulder, you're like, put on Pawn Stars, I want to watch top 5 Pawn Star deals. You're an old man ghost. I watch Pawn Stars on YouTube. But eventually you'll get to the books. You figure maybe I can broaden my horizons. No, it's the opposite. You're stuck in a location, which is what... See, here's the thing. I always knew ghosts would be stuck in a location, but I figured they would have some sort of awareness outside of that location. And the reason why I figured that is really 2 reasons. One, when ghost hunters show up to these locations that have been haunted for 100 years, the first thing the ghosts don't say is, why are you wearing such funny clothes? Why is there a picture of a pickle on your shirt? Also, what's a shirt? Like, none of this makes sense. Screen printing, pickles. They don't know what this stuff is. They've been in that house for 200 years, 100 years, whatever. The other reason why I would assume ghosts would have a standard level of knowledge, really, I mean, more than standard, they would be connected to some sort of ethereal network, is because psychics and mediums are always talking to them. Showing them where, you know, saying, hey, this ghost told me where this dead body was buried. Let's go, cops. Let's go out there. And the cops are like, we got nothing better to do. There's a bunch of rioting. There's a bunch of car accidents, crushed esophaguses along the side of the road. But the cops are going to go follow the psychic out to the side of a lake to find this body. And they're like, a ghost told me this. A ghost told me this. Or you have mediums saying, you know, connecting to ghosts, being able to solve things. Ouija boards. Most people assume, rightfully, that you're connecting with a demon, while others are like, no, you're connecting with the spirits of the dead. But where are those spirits? Is it easier to connect to a spirit in the afterlife than it is for a spirit trapped in a terrestrial convenience store? Like, you could be sitting outside that convenience store with that Ouija board and talk to Aunt Maud, who died in 1888. I think it's demons, but let's just say that you use the Ouija board to talk to Aunt Maud back in 1888, but you can't talk to Tony inside the convenience store. You're actually too far. Like, when I say too far, the doors are closed. You're outside. But if you took that same Ouija board into the convenience store, you could then communicate with both Tony and Aunt Maud. Theoretically. That's far more terrifying, I think, to me. I understand when a house is haunted, that ghost, the idea that that ghost is trapped there, it's stuck there somehow. I get that. I get it not being able to physically, or its soul not being able to leave that location. It's tied to that location. And a lot of times, I think, it wants to be there. The tragic ones where the ghosts are trapped, those happen too, but sometimes this is the house they grew up in. They've had 3 generations of kids in there. This is the house they love the most. They're here. Sometimes murder victims and things like that will haunt locations. I think a lot of those are residual hauntings. I don't think the soul of the actual murder victim is trapped in that house. But even the ghost that is haunting the house, I would assume that Alexander Hamilton's ghost, or Abraham Lincoln's ghost, knows what's going on in Australia right now. I'm not saying that he would know everything. I mean, he does have that giant hole in his head. Probably hurts his memory a little bit. But I'm not saying that he would know everything, but he should know what normal people know. He should be able to read the newspaper or glean new knowledge from sources outside of the Lincoln bedroom. I mean, to be fair, they probably have more information than the rest of us if you're walking around the White House, but you know what I mean. And this story says that just a couple 100 yards away, his girlfriend survived. She went on with her life, and he was still trapped in that convenience store because he thought she was dead or going to die. Like, he was reliving that night. And I do think that this was not just a residual haunting. I think there was some sort of... Because the kicking and the poking is a conscious desire of a ghost. Residual hauntings tend not to do that. They just tend to have a theater, a play that goes on over and over again. and you can see the ghost walking down the staircase. That's a residual haunting. When it begins interacting with the physical world, grabbing knives for one, that's when we classify it as a ghost. A ghost is what we know. So a crazy story. Like, again, it was supposed to be a simple 10-minute ghost story, and I kind of went off a bit there. But when I was talking about it, I go, that's insane that he does not know what's happening just a couple hundred yards outside that gas station or convenience store. And even if it was miles down the road or you figure a ghost, that's nothing to a ghost, right? You're floating, you got Casper legs. You don't even have to worry about getting legs cramps. And if it was right outside the convenience store, that's even more tragic. If it did happen right in the parking lot or 50 feet away from the convenience store, and Bill, the owner's son, saw it and was already getting ready to call the authorities as this man was running in. I mean, he could have turned, his ghost could have looked and saw the rescue effort taking place, but still all knowledge was limited to within this convenience store. Creepy story. I gotta be honest with you guys, I almost feel like I'm either losing my touch or this show is evolving into something else, something bigger, something really cool, because this used to be really rare where I wouldn't have to break up episodes, but that's exactly what we're going to have to do here. I don't have enough time to tell the other story. I already knew it was going to be a long story, so we're going to have Stay Strapped back, because I make sure that every Patreon supporter gets to fly in that Carpenter copter, but I'm not going to leave you guys just yet, because the next story, this was so fascinating, and I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking about this, and then we'll wrap it up. The story that we're going to do tomorrow is a Bigfoot story. It's been a long time since we've done Bigfoot stories, because a lot of Bigfoot stories are just the sighting. And every so often I find a story that's a little more exciting about that, but it's like they saved a family of beavers or something like that, or they gave a hunter acorns, and that doesn't appeal to me either. That's too nice. The beavers are cool, acorns are cool, fine, but it's not a good narrative. So every so often I come across these Bigfoot stories that are very dynamic, which is Jason code for violence. You're like, oh, somebody's going to die. But I wanted to say this. I pride myself, I'm going to pat myself on the back for this, that I really try to remain open-minded on a lot of stuff, and I feel good about that. Not so open-minded you believe everything, but this one I thought was really cool, and I never talked about this on the podcast. When I went to that George Norrie event a couple months back, it was so awesome. George Norrie on stage, Coast to Coast AM, and he interviewed Mr. Moon or Dr. Star, Dr. Sky. It's this astronomer he has on all the time. He interviewed Travis Walton, the guy who did Fire in the Sky, the guy who got abducted by the aliens. He interviewed somebody else. I don't remember who it was. But then, maybe it was just anyways, the one I'm going to talk about right now is Matt Moneymaker, who I had never really heard of before. I'm sure like I had seen his name in an article here or there, but Matt Moneymaker, I hope I'm getting his name right. He's a reality, that's actually probably underselling him. He's a Bigfoot researcher. He was doing Bigfoot research for decades before he ended up getting this reality show, I think on Animal Planet or the Learning Channel, called Finding Bigfoot. Let me double check that all. Let me double check that all that information's correct. Yes, Matt Moneymaker, been researching Bigfoot since the 1980s, was on the television show Finding Bigfoot, founder of the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. And here's the thing. Never met this guy before, never seen any of his stuff before. Longtime listeners of Dead Rabbit Radio will know that I subscribe to the idea. I was never a big Bigfoot fan in California. No one ever talked about it. When I moved up to Oregon, it's like the thing. You see Bigfoot stickers and shirts and all that everywhere. It's a big part of the culture up here. So I started looking more into it. And most of the Bigfoot stories we've covered on this show, I'll try to put a couple in the show notes, have been about my theory. And I'm not the only one who subscribes to this, but it's the idea that Bigfoot is interdimensional. because we have stories of them coming in and out of portals. We have stories of Bigfoots in UFOs hanging out with gray aliens. We have stories of humans apparently turning into Bigfoots. Sasquatches would probably be a better term for the plural, but we have all of this stuff. We have Bigfoots wearing human clothes and they're all tattered. So, like, was it a human who shapeshifted? The mystical side of Bigfoot has always been one that I subscribe to, because I said that would explain for a lot of things why we can't find their dead bodies, why we can't find them even living, why we don't find all of this evidence that we find of other animals that are alive, deers and muskrats and cougars. And it would also explain why they're able to retain their size and be so big, because they're probably eating 5-course meals in this other dimension or aboard a UFO, and then they come to Earth and they look like they're gentle berry-eating creatures. But where are all the berries? How's the ecosystem able to sustain all of these guys? These are all been questions that I've asked over the last couple years. It's only been probably about 10 years I've been a big Bigfoot guy, and because I'm a paranormal dude, right? Because I have a lifelong passion for the paranormal, specifically multidimensional things, ghosts, demons, aliens. I came at the Bigfoot phenomenon through that lens. So this was super interesting, and this is where I remember I was sitting in the audience and I go, this is why I love studying the paranormal, and this is why it is very important, you can pat yourself on the back too, to never be too married to any idea. Even when I think I made a couple comments, I think the Ouija boards are contacting demons. I think the Ouija boards are probably contacting demons. I think that if someone could provide evidence, not even evidence, I'm not talking about that, if someone could provide theories as to why that's wrong, if someone could give me, no, you're not actually contacting demons, and here's why, and these are reasonable explanations as to, yeah, demons exist, but the Ouija board is contacting spirits, it's contacting something else other than demons, I'd be more than willing to hear that, and I'd be really curious if it changed my mind, because what was so interesting was Matt Moneymaker, in one or two sentences, made me really rethink my personal views on the Bigfoot phenomenon. And that's important in this. That's important when you're into the paranormal, is to be open-minded. To this stuff. Because I've been like, oh no, they have to be interdimensional. It would explain so many things. This is so fascinating. So Matt Moneymaker, he opened it up at the end of his presentation for questions. And I don't want to misquote him. I don't want to completely misquote him. But so I'll try to put it as best as I can. Someone asked the question at the end of this, what do you think about the interdimensional hypothesis of Bigfoot? And Matt Moneymaker said, I've thought about that. I've actually looked into that. I've done research on that. And again, I try not to misquote him. He goes, while I can see the benefits of that, what I find very interesting about the phenomenon, the Bigfoot phenomenon, is that we almost exclusively see them. There may be a little bit here, a little bit there, but mostly exclusively see them in America, Central Asia, and Northern Asia. And he goes, that's what a biological species migration pattern would look like. If they started off somewhere in Central Asia, they would spread out in that same pattern, because we've seen other animals do that. We've seen humans do that. He goes, they're not in Africa. You don't have a ton you could say, well, it's so hot down there, they're so hairy. Well, see, even that, this was his thing. He goes, if they were multidimensional, they should be everywhere. They should be everywhere. Because what does it matter? They're popping in and out of different dimensions. You may have a report of a hairy man sighting in England or a hairy man sighting in South America. Stories pop up over the years because things are going to migrate past their normal patterns. But for the most part, you see the sightings in America, Northern Asia, and Central Asia. And here's the thing, if that's wrong, that was my mistake. I'm misquoting him, but If you go, no, it's actually in this other part of Europe that they're originally from, then don't blame him, blame me. But what I'm saying is that when he was saying that, and he goes, if it was a biological creature, it'll follow the migration patterns that we know biological creatures will follow, because we've seen it happen. We've seen the history of that over millions of years. We can look at an animal that's in North America and go, oh, it came over the ice bridge, the Bering Strait. We don't see animals that are originated deep within Africa in the Pacific Northwest. And without human intervention, things were not migrating from Britain to Oregon. Land animals. So again, if you have any qualms with this argument, don't go, what? He's an idiot. No, I'm misstating it. But when he said that really opened my mind. Like, I still am a huge fan of the interdimensional theory, but I'm willing to give a law. And it's not like I thought people were dumb if they believed in the biological one. It just, to me, it didn't seem to make sense. But this professional Bigfoot researcher, he's a pro. He said that, and I thought, that makes so much sense. It really does. Because we don't see them all over the world. We see aliens all over the world. We see UFO encounters all over the world. There's this really weird... I don't want to go on for too long. I feel like I'm going to start ranting again. But in the past month or two, there's been this really weird push I've seen all over the internet talking about why do only Americans see aliens. I don't know if any of you guys saw that. I saw it all over Reddit and really other places as well. How come is it that only Americans see aliens? And that's 100% not true. We've covered so many international alien stories, UFO stories on this podcast alone. Eastern Europe, pound for pound, I believe, has had more UFO sightings than America. We just didn't know about them because the Iron Curtain was up. If you go back and look at sightings in the 1990s, they absolutely exploded in Eastern Europe, and I don't think it's because there were more UFOs. I think it was because people felt more comfortable talking about it. They're all over the world. Humans are having interactions with aliens all over the world. There's been this weird psyop recently to say, how come it's only Americans? How come it's only Americans? It's not. Why did I get off on that subject? I don't know. But, if Bigfoots were interdimensional, they would be in the middle of Africa. You would see them at Antarctic ice research stations. You would see them walking around parts of Britain. And I know, and even Australia has the Yowie. They have their version of the Sasquatch. But that's still within, if it, could get over it's still close enough to be part of that migration pattern. I mean, okay, the theory's not perfect, and hopefully I'm not misquoting him. The point of the story is that is true. Or seems to be true. That the Bigfoot phenomenon, the Sasquatch phenomenon, does seem to be matching, if it was a biological creature, where they could actually get to. Those parts of the world. Which blew my mind. And that's really a kind of a lead, and I'm actually glad I did this today so I have more time to tell the story tomorrow. It's really what happens when mankind and Bigfoot meet. And I'm not talking about some hunters in the woods running across some big smelly creature eating a deer carcass. We're past that. As we continue to, I'm not a big climate change environmentalist guy, but as we continue to chop down trees and put up cities, we're encroaching on these beings, on these creatures, these entities' land. And it's one thing if you're doing it to a deer. It's one thing if you're doing it to a couple hedgehogs. I mean, it's still probably not the best practice. It's kind of mean, but I understand humans need a place to live. But when you're doing it to an 8-foot-tall creature built of pure muscle, what do you think's going to happen when someone brings their RV and parks it right next to the hunting grounds of the mighty Bigfoot? What do you think's going to happen? But we'll save that for tomorrow. Stay strapped. Keep your guns, because we're going to need them. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm so glad you listened to it today.